Okay, thank you. Okay, so we are stopped at this point. Now let us look at the fourth point. Okay, so another characteristic of English language is that in this language, in English, the nouns that we use, the nouns are categorized as masculine, feminine, common and neuter depending on their meaning. And most of the nouns are neuter unless they obviously refer to something that is male or female. Okay, and then we have the third person pronouns like he, his, she, her, hers, it, its, which also reflect gender. Okay, so what we can say about English language is that by adopting the natural gender system in the place of the earlier grammatical gender, it is a great advantage to the language. Now, what do you mean by natural gender versus grammatical gender? There are many languages, for example, Russian, Serbo-Croatian, Latin, French, German and Hindi also, where the spelling of the noun will determine whether the noun is a female noun or feminine noun or a masculine noun. Okay, not so in terms of English. In English, the meaning of the word determines whether it is to be considered to be male or female. For example, I'll just to give you an example. In Russian language or in Croatian, Serbo-Croatian language, if any noun ends with the letter a, it will be considered to be feminine. Whether the meaning of the word is something or the other doesn't matter. It is the spelling of the noun that determines its gender. Similarly, hate in German is a feminine noun ending. So no matter what the meaning of the word is, we will consider het nouns and are nouns as feminine. This is not how it works in English because the gender is directly linked to the meaning of the word. If the meaning of the word is male or female, then only we can call it he or she. Other than gender distinction that is there in many languages. Now what happens because English uses natural gender, it is very easy to understand and use English. Right? Please let me know if I get disconnected, if my voice lags, because there are some network issues that are happening. So CR and ACR, please let me know immediately. You don't have to raise your hand because I am looking at the PPT. Just unmute yourself and let me know. Did I get disconnected a few seconds ago?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so please let me know. I hear this strange noise. Yeah. So let me come back to the point. So what we are saying here is that the gender or whether a noun will be male
Ma'am, you are not audible once again.
or rather the meaning of the noun. Okay, there are terrible network issues. Let me join through another network and see if it's better. Are you able to hear me clearly?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. All right. I don't know where I stopped. What was the last thing you were able to hear?
Nouns, ma'am.
Yeah, I'm talking about nouns and gender, right? And I'm saying, could you hear my explanation of gender nouns in Russian and Serbo-Croatian and German? Was it audible to you?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, all right, thank you. All right, so what we are saying here is that in English, the noun will be masculine only if the meaning of that noun is masculine. The noun will be feminine if the meaning of the noun is feminine. It doesn't depend on the spelling of the noun, or it doesn't depend on the structure of the noun, okay? Which is not so in many languages, okay? Just to give you an example, for example, if we take the English word man, or we take the English word boy or king or lord or prince, now these are considered to be masculine nouns. They carry masculine gender because they refer to people who are males, right? So the meaning of the word itself refers to the gender of the person, right? Man means a male person, boy means a young man. So the meaning of the word refers to the gender. That is why we call them the masculine gender. Now compare this to a language like Hindi. In Hindi, what we see? In Hindi, we see that days, months, names of mountains, names of trees, flowers, fruits, countries, continents. Now, by meaning, they are not male or female. But in Hindi, in a language like Hindi, these all are considered to be masculine nouns. Now, this is the difference between a language like Hindi and a language like English. In English, the masculine noun or the masculine gender is attached to nouns that have the meaning of a man attached to them. So the meaning of the word, if it refers to a male persona, then only it will be a masculine noun. But in Hindi, days are not male and female, months are not male and female, mountains are not male or female, trees are not male or female, but still we associate them with masculine gender. So what happens when you have a language which associates certain words with masculine gender, even though they are not male words? We get to see that it creates a lot of confusion among new learners. If you are not a native learner of that language, you will have to remember separately that if I am using a word with, if I am using a sentence with the name of a day, I will have to remember that day is masculine. It will not naturally mean masculine, which you will have to remember. So for example, Sombar is a masculine gender. So you have to say Sombar aa gaya. It's not Sombar aa gayi. It is Sombar aa gaya. Sombar, the day, is a masculine gender. Okay. Same goes for feminine gender. In English, feminine gender is used for words that mean a female character, like a woman, girl, queen, princess, lady. They're all, the meaning of the words refer to women, right? But in Hindi, planets, rivers, languages, weapons are considered to be feminine gender. Not only that, I was talking about gender depending on the spelling. So for example, in Hindi, E, words ending with E, long E, are considered to be feminine. So for example, parchai. Parchai means shadow. Shadow, in the meaning of the word, you don't have masculine or feminine. But because it ends with the E sound, it becomes a feminine word. So when you say parchai, you will have to use the feminine gender. You will have to say, Meri parchai ja rahi hai, which is the feminine form of the verb. If it's a male form of the verb, you have to say ja raha hai, right? Ja rahi hai, you have to say with parchai because it is ending with the E sound, and all words that end with E sound will be considered as feminine. Similarly, the word ta. If there is a word in Hindi that ends with ta, like aswitva, okay, so ta. If it ends with ta, it will be considered as feminine. It is not embedded in the meaning of the word, rather it is determined by other rules that are not related to whether the word means something male or female. Not so in English. English is very scientific in that manner. English has used masculine and feminine gender for words that actually mean male people and female people, right? Is it clear to you what we mean by natural gender? That is why we call it as a natural gender, a language with a natural gender, because the gender that we use in English is because of the natural meaning of the words, not because of some other rule where even inanimate objects are given genders. Okay, clear to all of you? Should I explain it once again what we mean by natural gender? Anybody who has not been able to understand, please ask me. I'll explain to you once again.
Ma'am,
Yes.
once more, ma'am. Then
Once
natural
again.
gender.
Okay, all right. So let me explain once again. So in certain languages, the gender of a noun is determined by its spelling or by other rules. The gender of a noun is determined by its spellings or by other rules. So for example, in the language of Russian or the language of Croatian or in German, these are different languages where the spelling of the word will determine whether it's a male word or a female word. Okay. In English, we use a very simple process of determining whether we are going to use a male pronoun or a female pronoun. How do we determine gender in English? We determine gender in English by looking at the meaning of the word. If the meaning of the word refers to something that is male, then we use masculine gender. If we see the meaning of the word refers to somebody who is a female, then we use feminine gender. So it is a natural gender. It is not dependent on the spelling. So for example, in Russian, all the words that are nouns that end with A are considered to be feminine. No matter what the meaning of that word is, you will consider it to be a feminine word and use the she gender with it, the masculine gender with it. Okay. Similarly, in German, words ending with hate is considered to be a feminine gender, no matter what the meaning of the word is. Similarly, in Hindi, any word that ends with E, like parchai, whether the meaning of the word is male or female doesn't matter. If the spelling ends with E, we will consider it as a female word, as a female noun. Okay. So for example, parchai. Parchai, is it a male or a female word? It's not. Shadow doesn't have a gender in its meaning, right? Shadow is shadow. But then because it ends with E, in Hindi, any word ending with E is considered to be a female gender. And therefore, we construct the sentence accordingly. Meri parchai dikh rahi hai. We say dikh rahi hai. We don't say dikh raha hai. Okay, so immediately we consider it to be a feminine gender. Similarly, words ending with ta, satva. Okay, satta. Satta means power in Hindi. It ends with the word with the ta ending. Any word that ends with the ta ending is considered to be feminine. Okay, so whether the meaning of the word is referring to a female person or not doesn't matter. Similarly, in Hindi, days of the month, days of the week, months, mountains, trees, flowers, fruits, countries, continents are considered to be masculine, and then planets, rivers, languages, rivers, weapons, words ending with E, words ending with ta are considered to be feminine. Now what happens when a language uses this? When you are learning the language, you will be confused. You don't know whether to use karta hai or karti hai, raha hai or rahi hai, because it is not, the gender is not naturally coming. The gender is assigned by some other grammatical rule. Not so in English. You know that when you are talking about a male person, you will have to use he and him. And when you are talking about a female person, you will have to use she and her. It is very clear in English. It is natural in English. The gender is naturally assigned to words that mean male and female people. The gender is not assigned randomly or on the basis of spelling. Is it clear now? Is it clear to all of you? This is what we mean by natural gender. The gender is natural in this language. A woman, if we call a feminine gender, and we'll use she and her, because a woman, the meaning of the word woman means a female person. The meaning of the word girl means a female person. The meaning of the word queen means a female person. Similarly, the meaning of the word boy means a female person. It is not because the word is ending with OY, or it is not because the word is ending with AN. It does not depend on the spelling of the word, or it does not depend on the other grammatical rules. Clear to all of you? Please let me know if it is clear now. Whoever asked me the question, who was it who asked me to explain again?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, is it clear now?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, all right. Okay, so what we do in English then for other words, if there are words that can be either male or female, then we say it is a common gender. Okay, for example, teacher. The word teacher can mean both male teacher and female teacher. The word child can mean both male and female child. Worker, baby, infant, human being, person can mean both male or female. In that case, what we do, you use he or she, right? The teacher is sick. He or she will apply for leave, right? He or she, because we don't know whether it's male or female. We do not assign a gender to words that do not make it clear whether we are referring to a male person or a female person. And then what we do to words or nouns that do not have any gender at all, like inanimate objects like stones and chairs and tables and gold and and books and pens and so on, we do not give it any gender. We use it. It is a gender category that has no gender. It is not he or she, right? So we call them the neuter gender. All nouns and pronouns to which maleness or femaleness doesn't apply belong to this gender category. You cannot have male or female stones. You cannot have male table or female table. You cannot have male gold or female gold. So for all these words where maleness or femaleness does not apply, we use the pronoun it. And then we do not apply any gender category for them. Similarly, abstract nouns also are not given any gender category. So when you say childhood, independence, intelligence, chairmanship, we are not assigning any gender. Clear to all of you? English follows a very scientific method of assigning gender. It assigns male and female gender to words that mean male people and female people. Not on the basis of spellings, not on the basis of some other random grammatical rule. Is it clear to all of you?
Ma'am, I have a question.
Yes, please ask.
Ma'am, we often see that in certain literary texts, we see that neuter gender, ma'am,
Yeah.
not have a masculine or feminine
Right.
qualities, ma'am, are assigned such qualities, ma'am. Ma'am, is that an exception?
Right, a very good question, especially in personification.
Yes.
So when you see personification in literature, you will see that a gender is assigned to an inanimate object. Like for example, when you talk about moon, usually it is she. And then when you talk about storm, usually it is he. Right? Yeah. So this assignment of gender is not based on the language element of grammar. This is something that is very literary. It depends on the imagination of the writer. How is the writer imagining? There is no grammatical linguistic rule for this. Okay. So if the writer is imagining the moon as a lady goddess, then he or she is using the female gender. Okay, here we are talking about language use. Here we are talking about English as a language. English as a language does not assign gender to things that are not male or female. Clear? Yeah? You can see the difference in Eastern literatures and Western literatures. In Western literatures, moon is considered to be the goddess Luna. It is a female character in literature, right? In Eastern literature, in Indian literature, moon is what? Is it a male or a female in literary imagination?
Ma'am, it's assigned masculine character.
Yes, it's Chandra Dev, right? It is considered to be a Dev, a man, a male deity, right? So it depends on the poet's imagination and the cultural imagination. Here we are talking about the language that we are using in terms of English. Very good question. That's a very good question, very pertinent question, because it is something that should come to your mind when you are talking about gender. But is it clear to you how English assigns gender? It assigns natural gender. Words that mean male people are called as masculine gender. Words that mean female people are considered to be feminine gender. Clear? And that is why for transgenders and for queer and bi people, we do not use he or she, we use they, because we cannot assign, in the meaning of the word, we cannot assign a gender. Clear to all of you?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, all right. Shall we move
Yes.
on, or do you need further explanation? Can we move on to the next point? Is it clear to all of you? Okay, let us move on to the next point. All right. The fifth characteristic of language is that English has a fixed word order, and this word order is necessary for proper relationship of the word in a sentence and to avoid ambiguity. So the place of each word in a sentence decides its relationship to others. Okay, so usually in an English sentence, what is the sequence? We have the subject, then we have the verb, then we have the object. Again, in literature, in poetry, sometimes this word order is changed, and we already have a literary device for that. We call it the inversion. But the normal language that we use, the English language that we use, we have a fixed word order. If we are not using the words in this order, in this sequence, it will not make sense. Okay, so for example, take the sentence, the chicken crossed the road. Okay, now the chicken is the subject, the verb is the crossed, and the road is the object. Now imagine if you jumble the word order and try to rearrange that, you will see that it will not make sense. So instead of chicken, if you put road there and put chicken at the end, say the road crossed the chicken, it will not be possible to make sense. That meaning changes. So you have to follow this sequence where you put the subject, the verb, and the object in order to make sense. Okay. So again, you know, if you think that I'll put the verb in the beginning and then I'll put the object and then the subject again, it will not make sense. Okay, it will be out of order. For example, if I say cross the road the chicken, this will not be a meaningful English sentence. So in order to make a meaningful English sentence, each word would have to occupy the assigned place and follow the sequence. Only when we are following the grammatical sequence, we will make sense of the sentence. Now, this is not so in some of the languages. It would have been better if I could have given you an example from a regional language. Since you do not understand my regional language, you can try doing it in your regional languages and see if your sentence will make sense if you jumble the word order a little bit. Some languages allow the jumbling of the word order and still make sense. Some languages don't. English is one of the languages which will not allow you to jumble the word order. If you change the order of the words here, the meaning will not be coming in. Okay. Let us take an example in Hindi. मैं रोज स्कूल जाती हूँ. Everybody understands Hindi, I'm assuming, because that's the only language I can communicate to you in terms of making a communication apart from English. मैं रोज स्कूल जाती हूँ. Everybody understands Hindi, right? Some way or the other. Sure? Yes or no?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. Okay. So, for example, take this sentence. मैं रोज स्कूल जाती हूँ. Now, if you jumble the word order a little bit, will it still make sense? What do you think? Will it make sense if we jumble the word order a little bit, or will it not make sense? So how many words do you have? You have मैं, then you have rose, then school, then jati, who. Okay, so मैं is the subject, rose, school, this is adjective, school is noun, and then jati who is your verb. Okay, in Hindi, the verb is at the end of the sentence. So suppose I put the verb in the beginning of the sentence, or maybe I put the adjective in the beginning of the sentence. That verb, sorry, not the adjective, that verb. Rose is daily. Rose is daily. So when do I go? I go daily. So it is qualifying the verb. It is an adverb. So suppose I put the adverb at the beginning of it, still makes sense. Rose मैं school जाती हूँ. Will it make sense? It makes sense. Right? If I say Rose school जाती हूँ मैं, will it make sense?
Yes.
It makes
Yes,
sense.
ma'am.
Yes. Yes. So what is happening in this particular language? Even if you jumble the word order, the meaning of the sentence is unaffected. But English is one language where you cannot jumble the word order. Whichever word has to go in whichever place will have to remain there. If you change that sequence, the meaning of the sentence will change or it will become a meaningless sentence. Look at these examples. Okay, I have put this example here. मैं रोटी खाऊंगी मैं रोटी. All three combinations are valid. It means the same thing, that I want to eat roti. It is not affecting the meaning. But for example, take this English sentence, the boy dropped the ball. If I want to jumble up the order and say drop the boy the ball, it doesn't make sense. The ball dropped the boy, it makes a completely different meaningless sentence, that the boy dropped the boy. The ball dropped the boy. Same with any other sentence that you see. The boy gave flowers to his mother. If you want to exchange the place of mother and boy, the meaning of the sentence will change. Who is giving flowers to whom is changing. Okay. Similarly, the smart teacher taught the little children. If you exchange the place of the adjectives, then the meaning of the sentence will change. I'm going to the market to buy eggs and milk. Again, you have to keep it in this order to make sense of what you are saying. My son sings loudly and talks fast. So whether be it in terms of adjectives, whether be it in terms of adverbs or in terms of the verb or in terms of the noun, everything should have a place, proper place in the sentence. If the sequence is disturbed, the meaning either becomes meaningless or the meaning changes. Okay, so this is what we understand by fixed word order. Okay, all right. I'll stop here today. We have, I think, how many did we do? Okay, so this kind of a periphrases will add, to the beauty of the language, to the ornamentation of the language, and it will make the language interesting and varied and with a lot of variations. As I told you, the same thing can be said in a variety of ways. You want to do a little experiment with that. For example, suppose you say that, you want to convey the meaning that during the pandemic, a lot of people were very mentally disturbed and it affected them mentally. Now, what are the different ways in which you can phrase this sentence? Can somebody try? What are the different ways? You can phrase it in a formal way, you can phrase it in an informal way, you can phrase it in an elaborate way, you can phrase it in a short way. Anybody who wants to give it a try? How can you construct a sentence that conveys the meaning that the pandemic affected people mentally and they were, mentally affected by the lockdown and the pandemic? How would you say that in different ways? Somebody try it? One of you try it? Anyone? Someone? Give it a try. Just try to phrase this sentence with the meaning. Yes? No one. What is happening with this class? Last semester, at least some of you were responding. This semester, you are all dead. I'm teaching a computer screen, right? Please respond. Try to phrase a sentence which will convey this meaning. Yes, roll number 60. I saw your hand raised. Please phrase a sentence. Are you unable to phrase a sentence? Is that so? Let's see the different variations that we can get. Suppose I want to convey the message or I want to convey this idea that during the pandemic, there was an effect on the mental health of people. Phrase this sentence. Yes, Ashriya. Phrase the sentence.
During the COVID-19 pandemic, because of the isolation, the people were affected in many multitudinous ways, mostly in their mental health.
Okay, okay. That is one way of putting it across. Very good. Okay, anybody else? There are many other ways of conveying the idea. We are trying to see what are the different ways in which we can convey the same idea in a roundabout way or in a straightforward way, because this language allows us to convey the same idea in different phrasings. Yes, anybody else would want to try? Yes, Sushma?
Ma'am, the population has experienced a number of pandemic-related consequences, and one major consequence is severe negative impact on mental health.
Right, right. So what we see here, thank you Ashray and Shushma, there was at least some activity. So what we get to see in this particular exercise is that the same idea is conveyed by two people, but in two different ways. The phrasing is different. So what happens is that though the idea is same, the phrasing or the presentation of the idea is not monotonous. Like this, everybody would be able to phrase it in a different way and convey the idea in a different way. There might be multiple phrasings or multiple sentences that convey the same idea, but they have been constructed in different ways. So this is what we understand by periphrases, the roundabout ways of expressing ideas or feelings. In other words, it is possible to say something in so many different ways in English, and yet the meaning will remain intact. Okay, all right. Now we move on to a very, very important aspect of the English language, and this again is something that is very unique to English language. So many of the characteristics that we are talking about the English language might not be unique to English language. Unique means something that we find in English and probably not in many other languages. Okay, but this one that we are talking about here, the development of intonation, we see that this is something that is very, very unique to English, because we do not have intonation in our regional languages. What is intonation? Intonation is a modulation of the tone of your voice depending on what meaning you want to convey. Okay, so it is the pitch, intensity or tone of the voice while speaking that determines the meaning that you want to ascribe to something. Okay, now when we talk about intonation, English is a language that has intonation. That means we are supposed to modulate our pitch, our intensity and the tone of our voice as we are speaking. If you don't do so, your speech will sound very robotic. So there are different kinds of intonations that we find in the English speech. There is something called the falling intonation, there is something called the rising intonation, and there is something called the mixed intonation. So intonations in English, or the variation in tone and pitch, can be divided in three categories. Let us look at these. The first one is falling intonation, in which statements or sentences in English will end in a falling tone. Okay, so for example, I worked on a Monday. I worked on a Monday. Where is my tone falling? Where is my tone going? It is falling down. My pitch is not rising. Listen to me carefully. I worked on a Monday. I'm saying Monday, and my voice is going down. It's going to rain today. It's going to rain today. My voice is going down. My pitch is going down. This is called a falling intonation. So in English, most of the statements that we make, this is a Monday. This is March. This month is March. I worked on a Monday. It is going to rain today. I go to school every day. This is a falling, there they should be said with a falling intonation. Okay, where your pitch will drop. Okay. Similarly, questions that are starting with WH, the WH questions. Who, what, where, when. They should be said, according to British English, they should be said with a falling intonation. For example, how can I help you? What time does it start? Where does your friend live? Okay, you are not supposed to raise your pitch at the end of the sentence. You are supposed to fall your speech. Okay, how can I help you? See my voice going down, help you. What time does it start? Where does your friend live? It's going down. And also for low energy emotions, where you're kind of bored or disinterested or you're sarcastic, your tone will be falling intonation. For example, not really. Do you want to go to this concert? You are not interested, so you say not really. Or you are being sarcastic. Somebody asks you, can I give you 10 hours of work? And you say, oh, sure, that would be great. That would be great. So what are you saying? You are saying it sarcastically. You really don't mean it. That would be great does not show your interest. It shows your sarcasm. You are actually saying the opposite, or you mean the opposite. Okay. And when you are expressing boredom, that you are bored, and somebody says that, is the movie still going on, and you are bored to watch the movie, and you say, it's nearly finished. It's really finished. So what is happening in this? This is falling intonation. It is, your tone is falling as you are speaking. We'll do it once again. Most of the statements in English, this is a wooden chair. This is the projector. I worked on a Monday. It is going to rain today. I'm not supposed to raise the pitch of my voice. I'm supposed to let it fall. The chair is black in color. This is the class going on. Students have joined the class. This is how I'm supposed to speak. Statements. If I'm asking WH questions, who, what, where, when, then also my intonation should be a falling intonation. How can I help you? What time does it start? Where does your friend live? And then if I am supposed to convey low energy emotions, not really. Sure, that would be great. It's nearly finished. We'll also speak with falling intonation. Then when we use rising intonation, if we have questions with require an yes or a no answer. Do you like it? Do you like it? You don't say do you like it. You say do you like it? Is your name Kate? Is your name Kate? See the difference between the two types of questions? How can I help you? And do you like it? How can I help you? Do you like it? One is rising, the other one is falling. So WH questions will have a falling intonation, and yes or no questions that will result in an yes or a no answer will require rising intonation. Do you like it? Do you want to go? Is your name Kate? Is this the AEL class? My tone is rising. Class, like it? Your name Kate? It is rising. But if I am asking the WH question, where is the AEL class? Then I'll fall my intonation. Is this the AEL class? Then my tone will rise. Because this is an yes or no question, where the answer is going to be yes or no. So rising intonation is used for yes or no questions. What else? Where else do you use rising intonation? You use rising intonation when you are requesting some kind of clarification because you are not sure. So you say, what did you say? What did you say? You don't say, what did you say? You say, what did you say? That's not what you wanted. Was it? You are not sure. You are asking. You are Shelley's sister, aren't you? You are asking it to clarify. You are asking it to get more information because you are not sure about it. You study in Loyola College, don't you? So your tone rises, right? Don't you? Was it? That's not what you wanted. Was it? What did you say? It is a rising intonation. And also, if you are going to express high energy emotions, stop it. Stop it. Your tone will rise. When you are very angry and you say, stop it, that is rising intonation. Or you are very excited and you say, oh my gosh, that's amazing. Oh my gosh, that's amazing. My voice is rising. Or you are shocked and you say, did you hear what happened? Did you hear what happened? So there your tone is rising. So this is called as rising intonation. And then you have mixed intonation where you first go up, then you go down. Okay. Would you like a full cream or light milk? Would you like full cream or light milk? So would you like full cream, high, or light milk, low? Is it new or used? Is it new or used? New going up, used going low. Okay. Even tag questions are considered to be mixed intonation. You are Shirley's brother, aren't you? You are Shirley's brother, aren't you? So first falling, then rising. This one is first rising, then falling. So these kind of variations in pitch and tone are known as intonations. I'll do it once again. So falling intonation, most of the statements in English are in falling intonation where our voice is supposed to fall. I worked on Monday. It is going to rain today. Or when you have WH questions, who, what, where, when. How can I help you? What time does it start? Where does your friend live? These are questions with falling intonations. Or when you are expressing low energy emotions, not really. Sure, that would be great. When you're being sarcastic, sure, that would be great. It's nearly finished. So these are falling intonations. Then you have rising intonations for yes or no questions. Did you like it? Did you find it? Are you John? So yes or no questions. Or when you are requesting clarification indicating uncertainty. What did you say? That's not what you wanted, was it? Is this Loyola College? So you are asking for clarification. Or when you are expressing high energy emotions. Stop it. Oh my gosh, that's amazing. Did you hear what happened? So these are all rising intonations, and then you have mixed intonations. Would you like full cream? Would you like full cream or milk? Would you like full cream or light milk? Would you like full cream, rising or light milk? Is it new or used? So mixed intonation. So this is known as intonation. English is one language where we use intonations or variations of pitch. Not so in many languages. In many languages, we are supposed to speak with the flat tone. We are not supposed to change the pitch unless maybe it is something that has to do with an emotional meaning. For example, this one where you are talking about low energy emotions and high energy emotions can be found in other languages as well. That excitement is said with a high pitched squeaky voice, and then low energy emotions are said with low voice or falling voice. But apart from that, most of the languages do not use a variation in pitch and intonation. Unlike English, English has pitch and intonation variation in its language. All right. So with this, we have concluded our discussion of the 7 characteristics of the English language. There are certain characteristics of the English language that actually make it difficult to learn or difficult to use, and there are 4 elements that we can say that can form as liabilities of the language. Okay, the first one is something that we were talking about when we spoke about phonetics, the lack of correlation between spelling and pronunciation. So this is one of the disadvantages of the language, and especially when it comes to new language learning. There is really no correlation between the spelling and the pronunciation of the word. To give you an example, for example, the letter A. The letter A in a word can be used and pronounced in several ways. For example, when you are talking about SATHNDMATCH, you are pronouncing the letter A as A, like sat, hand, match. But then when you are putting the letter A in words like ASK, BALM, PART, LAUGH, then you are using the letter A as ask, balm, part, laugh. The same letter in writing, here becomes A, here becomes A. Then again, in many words, the letter A is pronounced as O, like was, want, wash, because, or. This is A, O. Same letter A, different pronunciations. Or it can be used as a long O, like tall, all, walk. Okay. Or in many words, the letter A is pronounced just as A, like any, many, A. Same letter A in writing, right? Or it is pronounced as E, like village, private, baggage, not village, not private, village, private, baggage. So see what happens if you are not familiar with the pronunciation of each of these words. as a new learner, it can confuse you because you don't know how to pronounce. Not so in the Indian regional languages. In the Indian regional languages, the letters of the alphabet and how we use the sound for that particular letter remain constant. So when we are writing ka, for example, the ka is ka everywhere, wherever it is used. It does not change. But in English, the letter A, the pronunciation changes. Changes from A to R to O to A to E. All kinds of sounds can be made by words with words that have the same letter. And this applies to many other examples as well, right? For example, the letter U. We were giving the example of the letter U. So P-U-T, B-U-T and C-U-T are pronounced differently. PUT is put, where you are pronouncing the letter U as U, but then BUT and CUT pronounces the letter U as A. So U and A, but the same writing is used, the same letter is used. So this becomes one of the problems of English language, one of the liabilities of English language, that there is a lack of correlation between spelling and pronunciation. The second liability or cumbersome element of the English language are the idiomatic expressions. English uses a lot of idiomatic expressions which are sometimes unnecessary. Things can be said in a straightforward way. So some of the idioms that you can come across: a blessing in disguise, a dime a dozen, beating around the bush, better late than never, bite the bullet, break a leg, call a dick. These are all different kinds of idiomatic expressions that stand for a particular meaning. So for some people, again, if you are learning English for the first time, for some people these expressions do not make sense because the expressions do not convey the meaning properly. There is a gap, just like how the written format of English does not convey the sound properly. Similarly, expressions do not convey the meaning properly. You have to learn the meaning individually. For example, breaking a leg, go and break a leg. If somebody tells you, if you are not a native speaker of English, or if you don't know this idiomatic expression, you will not be able to understand what is being said. Break a leg does not mean that you go and break somebody's leg. It means good luck, wishing you good luck. Okay. Similarly, when you say don't beat around the bush, if you are not a native speaker of English, you will say, well, I'm not beating around the bush, I'm sitting in the classroom. But beating around the bush means avoid saying what you mean, come straight to the point. Okay, so if somebody tells you don't beat around the bush, the person means that you come straight to the point. Now, these idiomatic expressions are things that people have to learn as part of the language, otherwise they will be completely confused. Similarly, bite the bullet. Okay, so if somebody says that go and bite the bullet, you are not supposed to go and bite the bullet actually. What the person means is that if you have to do something, go and do it, finish it. You don't delay it. So see, there is no correlation between the expressions and the meanings that they convey. And like this, there are several expressions where there is no correlation between the expression and the meaning. And therefore, for a learner of English, it becomes a liability, it becomes a difficult thing to learn, because then you will have to know the meaning of each and every idiomatic expression to make sense. Otherwise, you will be confused. Like, for the first time when you get to know break a leg means good luck, before you know that, you will be thoroughly confused why people are asking me to go and break somebody's leg. I'm not the kind who will go and break somebody's leg, right? But break a leg means that you are wished good luck. Okay, so this is again another liability of the English language. So we are talking about some of the disadvantages of the language after having spoken about the characteristics. So the lack of correlation between spelling and pronunciation, which makes it difficult for non-native speakers or learners of English follow the language. Secondly, idiomatic expressions, which again make it difficult for non-native speakers to really understand what is being meant, because this is something that does not match the surface meaning. This one actually has a different meaning. So similarly, call it a day. When you say call it a day, you are not being asked to call a day. You cannot call a day. Call it a day means, okay, we'll stop here today and we'll finish. Okay, stop working on something. Okay. The third difficulty with English language, especially for the non-native speaker, is the amount of words that English has. the copiousness of vocabulary and sometimes difficulties in using it. Many a times you are confused between commonly confused words, and many a times you are using the word in a wrong way. For example, alternate and alternative. Point again, what we mean to say here is that English has a wide range of commonly confused words that are very commonly confused. And not only that, it is difficult to use at well sometimes. The usage of the words also vary. The same word can be used in different ways and in different contexts. And there are more than 1 million words, almost 170,000 words that are there in current use. So if you have to say how many words are we currently using in the English vocabulary, we say more than 1 million. Almost 170,000 words are in current use, and in the English vocabulary there are more than 1 million total words. Okay. Not only that, another problem or another liability of English is that of its synonymous character. For example, take any word, and if you try to look for its synonyms, you will see there is this whole bunch of synonyms that are there for that word, which means that you have to learn all these words in association with that word to know the language. Okay, so here I've just shown you one example. These are the synonyms of the word big. Look at the number of synonyms that the word big has. B-I-G, big. So you have colossal, you have considerable, enormous, fat, full, gigantic, hefty, huge, immense, massive, sizable, substantial, tremendous, vast, a whale of a, ample, awash, brimming, bulky, bull, burly, capacious, chock-full, commodious, copious, crowded, extensive, heavy duty, heavyweight, hulking, humongous, husky, jumbo, mammoth, mondo, monster, oversized, packed, ponderous, prodigious, roomy, spacious, strapping, stuffed, supercolossal, thundering, voluminous, walloping, whopper, whooping. So many words can stand for the meaning of big, something that is massive. Many of them are even missing. We don't have massive here. We don't have gargantuan here. So these are words that refer to the same idea of something that is big. So because English has so many synonyms, once again, for every word that you search for, you will see that it is full of synonyms. So for every word, English has so many synonyms, then again it becomes a liability for the non-native speaker, because if you are trying to learn the language, you will have to get acquainted with all these synonyms and so many words that are in use. Okay, so these are the 4 liabilities or the 4 difficulties of English in terms of language learning for the non-native speaker, and these are the 7 unique characteristics of the English language. Okay.